So Joshua 24:14-18. I'm reading from the English Standard Version. The Bible says, "Now therefore, fear the Lord and serve him in sincerity and in faithfulness. Put away the gods that your fathers served beyond the river and in Egypt, and serve God. And if it is evil in your eyes to serve the Lord, choose this day whom you will serve, whether the gods your fathers served in the region beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites, in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." Then the people answered, "Far be it from us that we should forsake the Lord and serve other gods. For it is the Lord our God who brought us and our fathers up from the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery, and who did those great signs in our sight, and preserved us in all the way that we went, and among all the peoples through whom we passed. And the Lord drove out before us all the peoples, the Amorites who lived in the land. Therefore, we will serve the Lord, for he is our God." This is the word of the Lord. Praise be to God. Thank you. You may have your seats. Now, usually, there are certain words that are said by people, and they end up remaining impressed in our memory so much that when these words are mentioned, or that particular phrase is stated, you immediately remember that person, because that person is associated with the very words that are etched in your mind. And just to illustrate that this is true, I'm going to say certain words, and then you are going to tell me the person that comes to mind. Let's try and see if this works. There's this phrase, "I have a dream." Who comes to mind? Yeah, very good, very good. Feel free to consult. It's a free class. There is no exam, so yeah. So Martin Luther King Jr., "I have a dream." Good. Let's move to the other one. Yes, we can. Very good. Let's get to the tough ones. Naona hizi mnajua vizuri. "I have fought a good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith." There's a very smart student who shouted Paul before I finished. Very good, very good. One more. "This at last is the bone of my bones and the flesh of my flesh." Who said those words? Ati a Kenyan husband to his wife. It was Adam to Eve. Adam to Eve. Kenyan husbands, you are encouraged. Say these things to your wife. Yeah. And so that we do not leave our teenagers behind, who said these words? Niko freshi barida. Yeah. For the elders in the church, Steve Kipkemboi is an upcoming philosopher who is popular with our teenagers. Yeah, if you want to know more about him, ask the teenagers, they will tell you. And then the final words, "Choose this day whom you will serve." Who said these words? Joshua is the one who said, "Choose this day whom you will serve." And when we hear those words, we immediately remember this great person that was called by God in the next phase of the redemption of Israel. He took over from this great man known as Moses, and he led the children of Israel into the promised land and into the settling of the promised land. And Joshua had done many things in his life. He was a 5-star general that God had raised to take over Moses. He had a very illustrious career of leading Israel in conquering nations and settling the 12 tribes in the promised land. In fact, the book of Joshua has 24 chapters. The first 12 chapters are dedicated to the battles that Joshua engaged. A total of 32 battles that he engaged, and he won because God gave him victory. The next set of 12 chapters is Joshua settling the 12 tribes in the land that God had given to them. Now, when we get to chapter 24, Joshua has done many things, many great things. And then in this final chapter, he says many things. And his speech climaxes with these famous words, "Choose this day whom you will serve." And let me suggest to us this afternoon that these words are not only to be remembered, but they are also to be acted upon. It is a summons to action and a call to duty. These words said by Joshua are said to Israel during his final days. And we do understand, especially as Africans, that when a person is on his deathbed and he or she summons us to speak to us, we usually take these words with seriousness and with a sense of gravity, because we believe these are important words that will help us as we continue to proceed with life after he leaves us. And so Joshua is just about to die, and he summons all Israel in Shechem, a very significant place where we had milestone events taking place since the days of Abraham, all the way to now Joshua. So when they assemble in this place, they are totally persuaded in their hearts that we are just about to hear words that are going to have important ramifications for our days to come. So we have to open our ears to these words. We have to open our hearts to these great words that are going to be spoken by this great servant, Joshua, the 5-star general of the Lord. And in the same manner, I'd love to implore us today that as we listen to the flow of this text, as we listen to the message that God is speaking to us, just like Israelites who are persuaded they had to adopt a posture of seriousness, I do pray that we shall take these words deep into our hearts, and we shall not only listen and remember them, but we shall respond by moving into action, and that these words will motivate and inspire us and ignite a new passion for us to serve the Lord with better and greater zeal even this year. Now, to help us navigate through this passage in a very fast way, today we are going to move a little bit fast. We are not going to walk through the text. My name is Kipkemboi. We are going to run through the text. So bear with me if you're going to be a little bit in a hurry. So 3 mental handles to remind us. Number 1, 3 topic headings to remind us. Number 1, a decision so crucial. A decision so crucial. Number 2, a God so faithful. A God so faithful. And number 3, a hope so sure. Those are the 3 things that come out very clearly from this text. There's a decision to be made, and this decision is so crucial. There is a God that is described, and this is a God who is so faithful. There is a hope that, shines so brightly, and this hope is so sure. So number 1, a decision so crucial. Joshua calls on Israel to take a decision, to make a decision in their lives. And the options are clear. Joshua lays bare and tells them that on one hand, on one side, we have the Lord God Almighty, Yahweh himself. He is the first option that I'm giving to you. And on the other side, we have all other gods. Could summarize them using this beautiful song, that all the other gods, they are the works of men. So all these other gods form an alliance, and they are on one end. And then we have the one and only true God on the other end. And you're told, these are the options that we have. Binary. There is no other choice. Choose this day whom you are going to serve. Now, Joshua is a very good leader. And as a very good leader, he does not sit on the fence. We love leaders who actually take positions and live with the consequences of the positions they take. And we see Joshua, when he tells them, choose this day whom you're going to serve, he says something. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. He takes his position. He tells them, if you guys want to know which side am I sitting on, this is very clear. I'm not going to play the popular card. I'm not going to plant my feet on both sides. I'm going to be very clear. I'm going to tell you that for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And he leaves them to make that decision. Make a choice. Whom are you going to serve today? Now, this is the nature of that appeal that he makes. It's an appeal that he's making to them. You guys, you need to make a choice. Now, this is the nature of that appeal. Number 1, the appeal is to the entire community of Israel, as well as to each individual who is there on that particular day. As the people listen to Joshua, they understand that the call to choose is both for them as individuals and also as a community. And this is clear from the text. You see, when Joshua says that as for me, that is an individual, myself. And number 2, and my house, community, we will serve the Lord. So when they sit down there and listen to this guy, they understand that we are a community. We are a people of God. We have to choose a path that we are going to take. But in the same way, all individuals who are standing before Joshua on that day, that mother who is struggling with erratic kids, that father who is struggling, to raise up this family. That young person who is struggling with the passions of the flesh. That young girl who does not know how to handle the next phase of life. They understand that for me and in my situation, I am called to make this decision today. This day, we have to make a choice. Number 2, the call is also urgent. It is not to be delayed. Joshua says, choose this day. It's at this very hour that you are called upon to make a decision. This does not give room for us to procrastinate. Now, there are some of us who say that we will wait, enjoy life, and then after we are done enjoying life, then we are going to commit ourselves seriously. Now, that's not the proper attitude that we are supposed to adopt. That's not the expectation that Joshua is laying in our hearts. That's not the burden that the gospel builds in our hearts. The burden that the gospel and Christ build in our hearts is the burden to act with a sense of urgency and immediacy. Whether you're a teenager and you think you have many years to live, you still have to make that decision right now. I was telling members of the first service that indeed life moves on so very fast. I actually remember when I was very young like you guys, just the other day, I was very young. Today, everyone, right, left, and center is pressuring me to start a family. I'm like, man, I was a kid the other day. Right now, I need to start a family. And I give all manner of excuses. Edu was my excuse, now Edu has gone. Boy, I don't know what we shall do. But fewer things are more urgent than the decision to follow God. Third is that the appeal that Joshua makes is not just into their ears, but especially, even primarily, into their hearts. So Joshua expects that when they listen to this appeal through their ears, it also goes down all the way into their hearts, so that their hearts are stirred up, that their convictions are disturbed, their passions are awakened, and their heart is renewed. That's the goal of this communication. It has to go deep down into the hearts of the people. In verse 14, he says, fear the Lord and serve him in sincerity and faithfulness. Sincerity and faithfulness has to do with the heart. For something to be genuine, it has to come from the heart. For anything that we pursue to be sincere and faithful, it has to stem from a heart that has been persuaded that that is the right way that we need to follow. It has been said, and rightly so, that the problem of the heart is the heart of the problem. When we look at the many problems that we are facing here on earth, and we are careful to sit down and analyze them, we take it to its logical conclusion. At the very tail end, we will find the heart is comfortably seated there, because the problem of the heart is the heart of the problem. And the heart must be addressed even as we seek to make this decision today. The heart is the arena where many things take place. The seductions, the meditations, the temptations, the aspirations, and the decisions that we make happen in the arena of the heart. It is the center of who we are, and the call is to alter our deepest being to conform into the ways of the Lord. In other words, the call is that our hearts must be reconfigured and be installed with a new set of ambitions, and be granted a new appetite and a new outlook, so that we desire new things, so that our hearts are no longer hostile to the things of God, but we love and embrace the things of the Lord. And only God, if you realize what I've just said, it's a difficult task. It actually requires that a heart surgery be performed. Those who are medics, and even all of us, general knowledge, we understand that anything to be done to the heart is a serious issue. You actually have to rethink. If you're told that you have to undergo it, you'll seek second and third opinions, because it's a serious thing when our hearts have to be, opened up. But now, in a spiritual sense, the center of our being must be acted upon, and a surgery must be performed, so that a new system is installed, a new set of desires is installed. This surgery, allow me to suggest to us this afternoon, can only be performed by one who is qualified. And you and I are not qualified to do that job. It's only God himself, the one who fashioned our hearts, who is qualified to open up our hearts and deal with the problem that is deep-seated in our hearts. And God gives us a new heart, and he changes us from within. But unfortunately, among the people who are seated on that day listening to Joshua, unfortunately, even today, there are many people, some people who are happy to live with a heart that is divided. They plant one foot in the church and another one in the world. They want to have it both ways. They want to be in God, but they also want to be, in the world and to enjoy the things of the world that are even in opposition to the commandments of God. They want to drink poison and they don't want to be sick. They want to play with fire and not be burnt. And this is what has been called the miserable middle. They want to have, they have enough of Jesus to be miserable in the world, because Jesus is, disturbing you as you try to have the comforts of the world. And they also want to have enough of the world, but they are not satisfied, in Christ. So you want to, have a bite of both worlds, and you end up living a life that is miserable. You cannot be a fish and insist on living outside water. You will surely die. You will surely die. Remember this story of a man who loved animals and he decided to keep a pet for himself. So he went and acquired a cub, mtoto wa Simba, and he put it in his house. It was harmless. It was a sweet little thing. And he enjoyed, cuddling this, little animal, feeding it, playing with it. And people would really marvel at this relationship that this person had with the animal. But as days went by, this guy continued to feed this animal and it grew strong and it continued to grow. And he would come from work and embrace, this animal, and they would play and people would marvel. Fortunately, there's one day when he came, from work and he found this, animal that was in the cage, opened the cage, went and hugged this animal. And immediately, this lion devoured this man into pieces. He owned it, he fed it, he pampered it, and then eventually turned around and consumed him. Now that's the same way, the same thing that sin does in our lives. We invite it, we enjoy it, we feed it, we nurture it, we have a cozy time with it, and then eventually it actually consumes us. At the beginning point, we actually think that we are in control. Oh, I'll actually stop whenever I want. But all of a sudden you get to realize, I have sunk so deep, I am now a slave to sin. It's become my master. I don't know what to do with it. That's the same way that sin takes over us. And Jesus warned the church in Laodicea of the dangers of being in the middle. It all begins by being in the middle before we start, going all the way. Revelation chapter 3 verse 15 says, I know your deeds, that you are neither hot or cold, but I wish you are cold or hot. Let me read from the ESV. And that's a different verse. So stick with me. I know your deeds, that you are neither cold nor hot. I wish that you are cold or hot. Because you are lukewarm and neither hot nor cold, I will spit you out of my mouth. And at this point of time, the people are faced with a dilemma. And they're like, the options are very clear, but why then should we choose God? Why should we follow the path of God? Why should we forsake all others and be joined to God alone? So as they look ahead, they see God and his goodness. As they look behind, they see the seductions of the world that is around them. They see the lights and the smoke. They see the beauty of the city life. They see the allure of the worldliness that is around them. And they are tempted to actually go back to their ways. The Bible says that he who holds on to the yoke and looks back is not fit for the service. That's what Jesus says in the New Testament. And the people are like in a dilemma. How then should we act? Sometimes you get into a dilemma. There's a restaurant I love going to in town with friends sometimes. And usually I'm spoiled for choice. When I look at the menu, I don't know what exactly should I have here. But I love fish. I love fish so much. So I usually have fish. But on one of the occasions, I decided, let me try something else. So I took something else. But then when I was just about to eat, somebody across the table ordered fish. And let me tell you, this fish, the way in a letua, it comes with style. It is pampered, sizzling, and very attractive. You actually escort it with your eyes, ikienda. Because you want to see where is the destination of this fish. And immediately for a moment, I started questioning my life decisions. On earth did I not select this fish? No, I was like in a dilemma, a divided heart. Now the people of God here are also faced, with a dilemma. Not similar to mine, but different a little bit. But the dilemma here is false because God cannot be compared to the idols that are around. So what Joshua does before he actually calls them to make this decision, he actually takes them through the faithfulness of God. And that's our second point, a God so faithful. I hope we'll be able to go through the second point. A God so faithful. This is the background of the call to make a choice today. When you look at Joshua chapter 24, we haven't read the entire chapter. I do encourage you at your own time to read the entire chapter, even the entire book. It's a very interesting story. But this call to make a choice is couched in the background of the fact that God has been faithful to not only deliver them, but to also grant them the promised land. God's faithfulness is the conspicuous backdrop against which his servant Joshua pleads with us today to choose God. So what Joshua does, he runs them through an important journey, the journey of God's faithfulness to them. He gives them a panoramic view of God's promises and his goodness, all the way from the call of Abraham, through their redemption from Egypt, across the miracle-filled journey in the wilderness, through the victories against Jericho, against Moab, against Canaan, against Balaam and everyone else, all the way to this beauty of the promised land where they have settled. And indeed, all the way from Abraham to Jacob, from Joseph to Moses and now to Joshua, God has been outstandingly faithful. That is the case that Joshua is making before them. He's telling them that if we are in a court of law and evidence has to be adduced, someone is making a claim that God is faithful, where is the evidence? And Joshua comes and says, this is the evidence, and it demands a verdict. And this verdict must be made by you, by myself, and by all of us as a congregation. Look at the evidence. God has been faithful. There is no one who can make a claim that God has been unfaithful 1 inch, 1 bit. Look at him. So as you make this choice, think about what God has done for you people. So the people are being called to pledge their allegiance to the faithfulness of God. The people have broken the commandments of God. They have been unfaithful to him. They have disappointed God. But God has continued to love them through and through. In fact, the case is like that of a husband and a wife. And then the husband cheats. And the wife finds out and confronts the man. And what does the man say? Watu huwa wanasema nini? Wale watu huko nje huwa wanasema nini? Shetani. Ilikuwa shetani tu. And the wife forgives the husband. And then unfortunately, the husband goes and cheats again, comes back. And then the wife, imagine, forgives. And they start living again. And then goes ahead, cheats, comes back, and then forgives. You are looking at me because it sounds ridiculous. In fact, you're saying 10 things that are impossible in Kenya. That one which Pastor Kip is telling us. But let me tell you, the love of God is, sometimes you think about it, it sounds ridiculous. That's how much we have cheated. God, we have messed up so many times. We have been unfaithful. But then we come back to God and he forgives us. He has been patient with us. And I want us to think about that God has been patient with us. He's been faithful in keeping his promises. And so when you make that decision, think about that. That is the backdrop. When Joshua is speaking behind the pulpit, the backdrop that is there so, stretched out is the faithfulness of God. And finally, a hope so sure. A hope so sure. Remember that this event was in the context of renewing the covenant between God and Israel. If you read that chapter, you'll actually realize that after the people pledged allegiance and they said, far be it that we should forsake the Lord. They said we are going to give all our allegiance and fidelity to the Lord. After they did that, they entered into a covenant. And Joshua was acting as the priest and as the mediator to actually ratify this commitment that we have made today, that we are committing ourselves to the Lord. That was the covenant that they were making. But let me tell you, every time the Israelites in the Old Testament made a covenant, they were doing it with a certain expectation, because they knew that in the Garden of Eden, after Adam and Eve fell, there's a promise that God made in chapter 3 of Genesis, verse 15. He said that he's going to bring the seed of the woman who is going to crush the head of the serpent. Basically, one who is going to redeem the people. And all through the Bible, the Old Testament, it's just a scarlet line that is looking for this seed. Who is this seed who is going to save the people? Oh, is it Abraham? No, Abraham has failed. Oh, is it Moses? Moses has failed. Is it Joseph? He has died. Oh, is it David? David committed adultery and murder. Who is it? So they continue looking for this Messiah who is coming. And they would have, symbolic acts that will enable them to look forward to this Messiah who is coming. And one of them is the covenants that they would enter. And they would perform sacrifices. And these sacrifices were just foreshadows pointing to the ultimate and perfect sacrifice that was going to come and to save them. No, it's unfortunate that even after they made this covenant and commitment to God, they continued to live in sin. They failed God in so many ways because they, in and of themselves, they didn't have the ability to bring them into salvation. But they knew that they had a hope so sure. And this hope was imprinted in the Son of Jesus Christ, in the Son of God who is Jesus Christ. They were looking forward to the Messiah who was going to come, and the one who made the right choices from beginning to the end, all the way to the cross. He never made a mistake. He never forsook his Father. He never wavered in his commitment to the Lord. And so that is the same call that we make to us today. That as we make this decision that is so crucial, and as we think back about a God who is so faithful, we want to have this hope that is so sure. And this hope is in Christ Jesus. So how then do we respond to this call to allegiance? Three things, finally. Number one, our minds must be informed. From verse 1 all the way, what Joshua is doing, he is, telling of the story of the faithfulness of God. He is giving them the knowledge of God. He is informing their minds and jogging their memory concerning what God has done to them in the past. So we too are actually called to have our minds informed with the truths of God. And the church, A.I.C. Milimani, has provided many platforms for us. All the services that we have are actually arms of discipleship for us to actually know God better. The BEE, our discipling classes, Bible studies, cell groups we get and we discuss 1-2 things, conversations around tea. Yeah, that reminds me that today we actually have a cake, uko chini, but near teens. So please, just for the teenagers and the new ropers, we have a cake, uko chini, after the service. And as we take the cake, we need to instruct one another in the knowledge of the Lord. So we need our minds to be informed. But number two, our hearts must be reformed. Our hearts must be reformed. He tells them to serve in sincerity and faithfulness. He appeals to their hearts. The call is for them to reconfigure their hearts so that they have a new heart that loves God, a new heart that has acquired a new taste. And they have to acquire new taste buds that enjoy the things of God and abhor the things that are not of God. We must resist the seduction of our present day idols that are in our hearts. We must address the problem of our hearts, because once again, the problem of the heart is the heart of the problem. And we do not go just skin deep, but we go all the way into the chambers of our hearts, where the temple of idolatry resides. Third and finally is that our lives must be transformed. Our minds must be informed, our hearts reformed, and our lives transformed. In verse 24, and the people said to Joshua, the Lord our God we will serve, and his voice we will obey. So we'll not only listen to his voice, but we will also obey. Obedience must follow. Action must follow. Corresponding action must accompany our faith and our profession of faith. That is a life that is transformed. All the truths that we have listened to, everything that we continue to listen, from this pulpit and beyond, we need to put them into action. As someone said, knowing what to do must be translated into doing what we know. Amen? That knowing what to do must be translated into doing what we know. And we know that it is only Christ who can enable us to actually pledge genuine allegiance to God. Christ is the one who will inform our minds. Christ is the one who will reform our hearts. And Christ is the one who will transform our lives. So, choose this day whom you will serve. Choose Jesus Christ.